If you put 1 million monkeys in front of 1 million keyboards and gave them an unlimited amount of time, one of them would surely write an Android application. But the rest of them would write Objective-C. Hi there, Adam here. A lot of the times people forget that XDA isn't just for ROMs and stuff. We do apps too on XDA developers. So today we're going to design an Android app. So let's get started. Android apps don't just make themselves. You have to start off by designing your app. A good place to start is with a pen and paper. So let's start designing. First thing we want to do is outline the main box that we're going to start our app. And then let's add in a little control here. This is where we'll type in some text. Next we'll put in a button. And finally, let's put in a text view. So this button right here is going to be save. And then this right here will be a text input box. And finally, we'll have a text view. What this app is going to do is anything that we type in here into our text input box, and then we hit the save button, this save button will automatically put this onto the hard disk, well, the SD card on the device. And then when we load the app up, it'll go right into the text view. Now, of course, we also want to have this save button put our data right into the text view as well. So let's get started.
Alright, so now we've already went through these steps before in how to develop an Android app part 1 where we set up the SDK, and we already started a new application in part 2. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a first application that uses the newer SDK stuff, and you'll notice here we are targeting a minimum API level of 2.3, the target API is 4.0, and we want to compile with the newest stuff available. So let's hit next and next. Now for the icon of the project, I've already got that made, and I'll just select that. Here's our new icon for this project, and we'll create a blank activity as well. We can go ahead and leave all these as default, and now we're about ready to start working with our graphical user interface. Alright, so first things first, we can get rid of the hello world on there. Next we'll add a button, scroll on down to text fields, and we can add in a text box here. And finally, under form widgets, we can add a text view. Now we can go ahead and expand this out. Alright, so now we want to name these things the same way that we laid them out right here on that little piece of paper that we were working with earlier. So now we'll go ahead and edit the text, and this ID will be text input. Let's go ahead and change the name of button 1 to save. And let's just remove the 1 off the end of text view. Alright, now we're ready to start working with our source. So now it's always good practice to start with some notes. So I'm going to put in some notes here really quick, and it'll define the basic layout of what we're going for with this application. Alright, so now I've outlined just about everything we're doing in this episode, and these are the things that we need to do in code. We need to set up widgets, load the text from the file, that'll be the file on the disk. We need to have a view handler, and then we need to have a button handler in the view handler. And we need to save the text to a file and display the text on the screen. So let's get started, and we will do the setup widgets first. So the first thing we want to do is call a method that'll just set up all of our widgets. So now this method does not exist yet, so what we can do is create a new method, setup widgets. Alright, so now we will start by defining our button, and the way we do that is we do something like button save equals button find view by ID r.id.save. Now we don't have button imported yet, so Eclipse is going to say, well, that doesn't make sense. So we need to import button, and you notice up here we now have button as a part of our project. So now we can do save dot set on click listener this. Alright, and Java doesn't like that for right now, so we'll just gray that out for a minute. Well, green it out. Alright, and one more little thing right there. Get rid of that little squiggly underline there. And next thing we need to do is we need to set up the class variables for the input and the output right here. Because these things need to be referenced from several points in the class. They need to be class variables. So we'll go ahead and say text view. And of course we need to make the text view part of our project. And there we go. So we've defined two variables, but they don't know what they are in the project just yet. So we'll go ahead and start defining them. Alright, so now our text output is associated with the text view. So now if we need to reference anything on the text view, we can use the text output variable. Let's do the same for the input variable. Alright, now one thing I'm doing wrong here, and this happened right away, is Android variables should be named with M in front of them if they're private variables. Alright, so now to make this save on-click listener, this stop being read, what we need to do is we need to implement the on-click listener as a part of the view itself. This will make things a little bit easier. Alright, so that's that, and you'll notice that we have this set on-click listener that is no longer read out, but we have this problem right here. We need to add unimplemented methods. So we now have a method that handles the view.
So a cool little tip that I learned from XDA Elite Recognized Developer Super Curio is instead of assigning an event and a method to each one of your inputs, the buttons and all that stuff, what you do is you just assign the entire view as an input and separate it out in a method somewhere else. That makes it so much more clean because you don't have to assign an event listener for everything.
Now, anytime anything's touching the view, it's going to go into this method right here. So what we need to do is we need to filter that down. Alright, so now with this statement right here, we're basically saying that we've got a button, something was touched on the screen, and if it was the button, then what we want to do is we want to perform some actions. So let's give it some actions to perform. Now we want to start off by taking the data from the input, the text input, and displaying it on the text output. Alright, so now we've got a variable called text, and we need a place to put that. So let's put that onto the text view, the text output. Alright, so what we got here is we have the text output, and we want to set the text to whatever this variable is from the text input, plus whatever was on the text output in the first place. So at this point we can go ahead and test this app out and make sure it works. Alright, so now it looks like our text view is working pretty well, but we have a little problem. It's not putting stuff on a new line, and what we want is every time that we put something in, it has to go to a new line. So we'll do plus, and then we'll just put in a /n right there, and run it again. And you can't really see it very well, but as you can see, everything's working just fine. Alright, so now let's set up a file that we want to write to. We'll go ahead and put it in here. Final, static, string, and we want the file to be called notes. So there we go. So let's go ahead and start writing our notes to the file. Now the first thing we have to do is open up a file output stream.
So you might be asking yourself, well, what's a stream? A stream is where you take data from one place to another, and you basically serialize it, so you're looking at one bit at a time, or maybe even one line at a time. In this case, we're looking at it one line at a time.
Now Android has a method of opening up a file, and it's pretty darn easy to access. Check this out. Now we'll go ahead and import file output stream, and we need to add a context mode here. So we'll do context mode, and we want that to append. Alright, there we go. So now of course when you're working with files, anytime you're expecting a file to be somewhere, it's going to throw an exception. So we'll just go ahead and surround that exception with try catch.
So an exception is where something went wrong that wasn't quite planned, wasn't quite exactly what was expected to be the output, like the file was missing, or there was a problem with the stream, or something like that. So what you do is you can actually program in an exception into your app so that if the file is not found, what you can do is you can say, alright, well, then just leave it blank. But in this case, it's not really important because we can just ignore it and the program will still continue on just the way it's supposed to.
Alright, and now what we want to do is we want to write using the FO object that we created, and we want to put in the text. But now it's expected to be in a certain format, so what we have to do is we have to do the get bytes, so that way we're writing bytes out to the file output stream and not a string. And of course that's going to add another exception, but now just for the purposes of tidiness, I'm going to rearrange this a little bit. Alright, so now what we have here is we're actually writing out the string to the file, but now we also want to do the same thing that we did before with the /n at the end to make sure that we get a new line in the file. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll do fo.write, and we want to put in a /n, but we have to do get bytes. Alright, so now every time we press the button in the application, what it's going to do is it's going to get the text from the top label in our application right up here, and then it's going to set that text into the top line right here. Then it's going to open up a file for output. In append mode, it'll write out the text that it got from here, plus add a new line to the file. Alright, so that's that. And this bad boy can get out of here. Now, for right now, we're also not going to use this menu option, so we can clean that up as well. And let's head back up here and see what we need to do to finish this app up. And that would be loading the text from the file when the view is created. So we'll go ahead and let Eclipse handle making that new method for us. Alright, so now in order to load the text, we have to open the text file. And so for that, we will need a file object. Alright, so now this is a built-in accelerator for Android, the get files directory, and that points you basically directly over to the /data/your application folder /files folder. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and import the file object because we need that, and we can continue on. Now, because we're working with this line by line, what we need to do is we need to handle it with a buffered reader, which is allowing us to take the file and read it line by line. Makes it a little bit easier. And in order to adapt the buffered reader to a file, we need to put the file into a file reader, which can then go into the buffered reader. And we'll go ahead and import these. Got that new there. And of course we got to surround it with a try-catch because we're dealing with a file. So now what we want to do is when we read the file, we want to read it line by line and import that line into our project one at a time. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so now what we have here is we have a buffered reader that we're reading a line from, putting that into a line variable, and this loop will continue through until line equals null. And you can see here by the highlighting that it has here, maybe you can't, but basically what we have here going on is we're looking at this value right here. We're saying line equals br.readLine, and then outside of these parentheses we're saying it doesn't equal null. So if the null, for those who don't know, null actually means nothing at all. So once the file is at the end of it, it's going to mean nothing at all. It's not going to be putting anything out because it's at the end of the file. So as long as line is not null, this loop will continue to read the file. Now Eclipse is throwing an error because we're actually working with the file here. So what we want to do is we want to add a surround with try catch, and we'll go ahead and pretty this up a little bit too. Alright, so now what we want to do is while we read the line, we want to say mtext. Alright, so now what this little loop right here does is it reads text in from a file that we have established right here that gets its data from file name that is up here, the notes.txt file. And what this does is it reads line by line, gets the line, puts it into the text field, and puts all the rest of the text right after that line. So essentially we are reading a file from top to bottom, but we're writing it out bottom to top. And one final thing you want to always do is you want to make sure that you close your file when you're done reading it. So we'll do br.close. And that's that. Alright, so now two little things that we should add to make sure that this program works the way it's kind of expected. Now, it's kind of difficult to see this on this screen, but you can see that when I move my finger up and down, there's no scrolling going on. And also another thing is, when we hit this button, one would expect that the data would disappear from the screen, from the text input box. But now, that's not the case. This text input box is not programmed to remove all the data when you hit the button on the application. So what we're going to do is we will go down here to our on-click view, and the first thing we want to do is get the text, and then next thing we'll do is mtext input dot set text, and we want to set that to a blank. Alright, so now in our set widgets function, what we want to do is we want to set the mText output, and we want to set the scroll method on that. So let's do that. Now we need to import the scrolling movement method, and that should be that. And we'll go ahead and clean up this code just a little bit. Now, testing is a big part of developing an application because you want to make sure that your application actually does what it's supposed to. So I pretty much tested it under most conditions, and this is what the application looks like. And I'm kind of blowing through this end result part because the end result isn't really important. The fun part is getting there.
So that's all for this episode. As a way of saying thank you, I'd like to offer an XDA Developers bumper sticker, and you can get this by leaving a comment down below. There's also going to be a forum post that will be for discussion of this application. It's going to be an ongoing application. And you can leave some comments in there, and feel free to download the source at xda-adk.googlecode.com. Now, I'd like to remind you again that I'm a lot better at Java than I am at Android. Now, while Android is based on Java, it's a little bit different. But, you know, I mean, if you have any tips, let me know. I'm always up for improvement. That's all for this episode. Don't forget to add me to your circles on Google+, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and leave a comment in the comment section down below. Until next time, hack on!